Hey, welcome to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. I'm Li Chouyan, sitting in for Liu Xin. In the next 30 minutes, I will dissect China-related stories that are making headlines around the world and talk to my panel to bring you the missing pieces of the China puzzle. So join us in real time by sending us your comments or questions via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as Weibo. If you're watching this live on the CGTN app, email us at thepointwithlx@cgtn.com. Let me know your thoughts. We start our live streaming every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Beijing time, so do get in touch, and we might just read out your comments. Now, the topic of our discussion this week, the 20th anniversary of Macau's handover to China in 1999. Under the one country, two systems principle, the Macau Special Administrative Region has developed into one of the territories with the highest GDP per capita in the world. And data from the International Monetary Fund's 2018 report ranked Macau number 2 with over 120,000 US dollars per capita. And Macau's economy has also expanded significantly over the past 20 years. GDP in 2018 was 7 times more than 2 decades ago earlier, with the booming gaming sector acting as the driving economic force. And looking ahead, Macau is expected to continue to thrive, not only through its gaming revenues, but also through new and innovative industries. So areas undergoing this radical change include the conference and exhibition industry, the financial sector, the traditional Chinese medicine industry, as well as cultural and creative products. Now, one of the issues in Macau, given its small size, is the availability of land. Recognizing the shortage of land, the central government approved a plan to build a new campus for the University of Macau on Hengqin Island on the Chinese mainland in Guangdong province. This also allows the Macau SAR government to exercise jurisdiction over the new campus zone right after the construction of the new campus was completed in 2013. But Macau is not without its problems, and the government is working hard to address these issues. An article published last year in the South Morning Post of China highlights some of the difficulties average people in Macau are facing. It documented the story of Hui Sao, a casino cleaner who has to travel to the mainland city of Zhuhai, where food is half the price of what it is in Macau. Now, these days, trucks loaded with fresh produce effortlessly pass the border checkpoints in neighboring Zhuhai city to the markets of Macau, a big change. And of course, more needs to be done to tackle inequality and address problems of affordability, and local people naturally encourage this. Beijing is committed to Macau's economic prosperity as well. There are several great bays around the world that have proved to be successful. So to boost the development of Macau, the central government unveiled this plan for Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area in February. And last October, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, the world's longest sea crossing bridge connecting Hong Kong and Macau to the city of Zhuhai on the Chinese mainland, just opened to traffic, an effort to boost the development of Macau to the next level. Now, as China is celebrating the 20th anniversary of Macau's return to the motherland this week, international media outlets, however, have chosen a different narrative to document the anniversary by focusing on Hong Kong. So let's now take a look at this article published in the Financial Times. Now, the headline reads, Macau lessons for Hong Kong from Beijing's good student. Now, the headline poses that Beijing regards the two special administrative regions as its two little children, one good, one bad. While both regions have a history of colonization, the two are fundamentally different. They have wildly different population demographics, different economic models, and different developmental priorities, as well as political leanings. So we should understand, Macau and Hong Kong are different, and we cannot impose Macau's values and practices onto Hong Kong. So what do you think? Let me know your thoughts on this. After the break, I'll be speaking to my guests about this historic week in China history and how it has been reported in the international press. You don't want to miss it. Stick around.
A city with a big name, but a small population. A place full of energy and ready for change. From an old colonial outpost to one of the busiest resorts in Asia. After its return to China in 1999, Macau has been on a steady path to wealth and prosperity. But where can this extraordinary melting pot of minds and cultures go from here? We will reflect on the moments that have changed its history and look ahead to those that could alter its future.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. Now today we're talking about the 20th anniversary of Macau's return to China, and joining us on the set are Professor Zhao Hai, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Mr. Marcus Vinicius de Freitas, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for New South, focusing on international law, international relations, and also a currently visiting professor at China Foreign Affairs University. Thank you so much for joining us, professors. So let me start with Professor Zhao here. It's been 20 years since Macau has been handed back to China after centuries of colonial rule. How significant is this landmark occasion for China?
It is very significant. As you said, Macau and also Hong Kong has been separated from China for hundreds of years. And finally, after a very long period of time of colonial rule, it returned to the motherland. So now the whole continent is reunited. And after 20 years, you can see that there's significant economic and social and political progress in Macau. And that's why we mark this 20th year anniversary to celebrate the return of Macau.
Mm-hmm. And Marcus, you hold dual citizenship of both Brazil and Portugal, right? So from your community, how are you guys looking at this news? How do you think? What does this mean to China?
Oh, I think it's a great time for China to see everything getting reunited. You know, we know from the history of China that China sometimes lost territory, got the territory again, back again, and I think it's important. And you see the positive results that the policy has had in Macau, and you see that there is a possibility of the improvement of ties with the Portuguese-speaking countries by using Macau as a platform for China and for mainland China. So I think we see that the territory getting together and everything becoming again China, with the growth of China, we see that as a possibility for future business and for future developments in the relationships.
Now let's talk about the reactions from global media. Does Beijing view Macau as the good student, as Financial Times, the article suggested, we just pointed out, Professor?
Well, I think it's the wrong way to take that. One country, two systems is China's policy, and Macau is practicing one country, two systems. It's not necessarily as a student to learn from Beijing, following Beijing. That implies that somehow Macau is not following the rule of one country, two system, the principle. So I think that's really the wrong way to take it. Macau has been progressing just exactly because one country, two system has been applied very successfully in the region. So I think the right way to take it is that Macau's progress is the creation and really diligent work of Macau's own people, and also because the Macau SAR government followed strictly the one country, two system principle and executed that to the word, following that principle.
Why do you think Macau is a successful practice of one country, two systems principle? What makes it work there?
Well, there are a lot of factors. One of the most important thing is the support of the central government. As we know that Macau depend on mainland China for a lot of resource and supply of energy and water. And also, on the other hand, Macau itself has strictly following this one country two-system principle, particularly the one-country principle that followed and practiced this very successfully in education, in the rule of law, and also in social progress. So that makes Macau very special in terms of the development of society. You can look at the per capita GDP, you can look at the diversification of its economy in the past 20 years. I think the support of its own people gave the government the possibility that they can execute a lot of new experimental rules and finally get successful results.
Yeah, and Professor, your thoughts on this kind of comments, the good students?
Well, I think we could say that it's a good student because all the positive results that Macau has derived from getting back to China. I think that Macau had the understanding that the population understood that it could greatly benefit from the interaction, a greater interaction and greater connection with China. So you could have this a two-scenario thing, people who cannot get disconnected with the past and, always look back into the past and feel sorry for, say that the conditions are changing and they want to have these strings attached to the past. Or you can be forward-looking. And I think what you have in Macau is that the population and even the administration of Macau was forward-looking in the sense that they realized it's a small island, 650 people, 650,000 people, that needed to find a way to reinvent themselves. And I think that this proximity and getting back to China allowed Macau to reinvent itself. And I think that's why people would say that's been a good student. It has been able to find out its limits, and also by understanding these limits, also design the new possibilities. And I think that's why people are referring to it as a good student.
Yeah, another doubt that people are having about Macau is that they say there's a growing anger in Macau over the issue of wealth inequality. This has also been pointed out by the Times. Where did journalists get this idea? Is there any evidence of this discontentment?
I have no idea, and so far I haven't seen that. You can say that you can apply that to the consequences of globalization. That appears more in many countries, more and more. There are protests around the world against this growing gap between rich and poor, and particularly in developed countries. So I think to say that somehow Macau has more severe problem than the other countries in that respect is really wrong way to look at it. And so far there's no sign of protest or the so-called anger reflected in Macau on this issue.
Agree or disagree?
Well, I think that when you have your GDP per capita going up so high, like it happened in Macau, you look at the numbers and you see that the GDP per capita is one of the highest ones in the world. Of course, there will be inequalities and there will be, problems with housing and people who do not have money enough to afford the new reality. I always recall this. I give my students a case that in Somalia, for instance, as a result of piracy, Coca-Cola, a little can, was very expensive, one of the most expensive Cokes in the world because the pirates had money. So what you have is that when you have this jump, which is sudden, right? We can see that it's been going up. You do see the issue of inequality coming up. Now, what the government needs to do is to create the policies somehow that are going to make the adjustments so that those who are left behind, or what we call the have-nots, will somehow find a way of getting their situation improved. So I think that that's the good thing about Macau. Since you have money, you can actually plan on how to make these policies so that these inequalities are fixed. But of course, it's going to be hard because when you have this initial jump and you go so high, you do see this happening all over the world. And it's a result of globalization. It's also a result of the economic situation of the place itself.
Yeah, they got to make the best use of the wealth the city has accumulated. Now, the Bloomberg also published an article this week with the headline reads, Macau chooses China riches over democracy. I mean, the headline implies there's a binary choice between, China, the Beijing government, and getting rich.
Well, that's
and,
always
and,
their
and a
logic.
democratic model.
That's always their logic, the binary between political freedom and material richness, for instance. So I think they apply that model or this kind of scheme to Hong Kong. Now they wanted to move that model to apply that to Macau. Actually, you can have both. And Macau shows that you can, on the one hand, enjoy the system of democracy and freedom, and on the other hand, have enough and also more and more balanced, diversified economy to support its own economy and its own people. I agree with what have been said just now. On the one hand, you enjoy the sudden reach, but most importantly, the government needs to have the policy in place to have more equal redistribution of wealth, and Macau has been doing that in a very efficient and quite well way to support its own citizens.
Right. Now, here's one comment from our viewers who are watching us. This is from Facebook. Flamenco Lee says, it's obvious, isn't it? They want to show China in a bad light only and nothing to report otherwise, but also showing another type of system can work is not what they want to expose to the world. Professor, your thoughts on this? You agree?
I think there is a China bashing all over the world now, right? Wherever you go. And you see that in the movies, you see that in politics, you see it all over. And I used to think there was only the United States, but you go, in Europe, there is also this sense. Why? Because the rise of China over the last 40 years has been a great disruption to the world. People are not expecting it, even though if you go back in history, Napoleon said that China was a sleeping tiger, and the day China woke up, it would shake the world. And that's what has happened. Now, you do see a lot of China bashing. We do see that there is a conflict in the economic models adopted by China and the rest of the world and the United States. And the problem is that we try to see conflicts, and we think that necessarily we need to have a war between the United States and China, and this is not really what's going to make the world progress. I always say that the design of the world is one in which you are supposed to have cooperation. I always say, you have harvest in the north, and in the springtime, and we also have harvest in the south in the springtime. So the world is made so in a way that we have cooperation all the time. So I think this China bashing is the result of not understanding that new players will come along, and China is the new kid on the block, but it's going back into its historical position of being the largest economy in the world, which makes sense, right? The size of the population, the size of the territory, and also the innovation that is taking place in China.
They feel threatened.
I think it's very important
by Chinese
that one country, two system is a historical experiment. And the success of Macau shows that that principle actually can apply and can be successful. That's what they are aimed at, trying to bash from that angle to say that one country, two system cannot work. Because China is pushing too hard on one country. Actually, it should be balanced, and the problems in Macau is that it can be balanced, but the problem, in contrast, in Hong Kong is that some people in Hong Kong is not balancing this two and pushing for two systems instead of focusing or insisting on the one country principle.
What?
And can I add just one thing? Sure. Also, historically, Macau has been used to being in a different system. Yeah. Right? If you look into the history of Macau, you see the evolution of the relationship between Portugal and Macau. So it was never fully integrated into Portugal. It was not, so you do see that Macau is used to that. And I think it's not unusual for them to understand that one country, two systems makes sense, right? We're changing and we're adapting and we're getting back to the motherland, right, as we said.
So do you think it's possible for Macau to retain its quasi-autonomy and also integrate with China and maintain a strong economy? I guess the answer is yes, but how do we convince the world?
It's not a contradiction that maintain autonomy while integrating into a bigger so-called Greater Bay Area. I think that is exactly the purpose of China's planning for the region, because maintaining a different system and your own characteristics is precisely the comparative advantage of that city. To attract more investment, more tourism, and as a platform to connect with Portuguese-speaking countries. And that's exactly their advantage. And then integrating into a bigger Bay Area means that you have more support, you have more population, more land, more resources to support you to develop further without the limitation of physical and population, right? So I think these two are actually mutually complementary instead of in conflict with each other.
Right. Now, New York Times also posted an article suggesting that people in Macau have been coerced into accepting the influence of central government. What's your response to that?
Well, I think you need to realize the positive impact of the central government in Macau, right? What would be the option in that sense that, would any other mechanism effectively deliver the results that Macau has obtained? Right? We like China bashing and we like to criticize, but the issue is this disruption creates a major sense that we're getting behind it, we're not finding a way to recover from it. So that's the normal process that you see happening. And one thing that I like to say regarding Macau is that I always tell whenever I travel that China is the best kept secret by 1.4 billion people in the world, because people don't really know how China is, how things operate in China. And I think Macau, in a way, could actually play this interface with the world so that we understand better mainland China. So it's China 1.1. You get through Macau's, and then you enter mainland China. And I tell that to the Brazilians, to the Portuguese-speaking countries, that that's a good platform for us, and we should work more in that sense. So when we go back, that they're being coerced by the central government, I would only say, look at the results. And this trade-off that we like to emphasize, freedom and improvement in the results, I think it's a ridiculous argument that sometimes we raise, because we're not taking into consideration that the whole purpose of government is to deliver effective welfare for the people.
Right. We've got another comment. Let's take a look at it. This is from YouTube. So Chang Yan Liang says, I think the Macau government should focus on education instead of gaming industry. Professor.
That's right, and that's what the government has been doing.
Yeah.
If you look at the numbers, actually gaming industry overall proportion of the economy is decreasing from 63% to less than, just a little bit over 50%, and it continue decreasing because of a lot of factors. And other innovative industries are growing in Macau. And also, recently, Hengqin created a new campus for the University of Macau. So the overall education system and education sector is growing in Macau as well. So I think the overall plan of the central government for Macau is, in the future, there will be an innovative hub, not only for technology, but also for culture, for multiculturalism. And they will prosper in many other industries other than the gaming industry.
Yeah, the city is trying to diverse its growth model as well. It have been rely heavily on gaming revenue, but is now trying to transition itself from a casino hub to a global leisure center, innovation hub, like Professor Zhao just mentioned. Your thoughts on this? How well the city is doing that?
I think it's a normal thing. Like, if you look into Vegas, it's the same thing. Like, it had a high reliance on gambling, but you do see that people start going initially for gaming. They like gambling. And then you have to start providing other services. And that's when entertainment becomes a huge issue for these cities. If you look into Vegas, for instance, gaming is not really the major driving force nowadays. People go for shows, they show for entertainment and cultural activities. Now, all these cultural activities demand a better education system, because you're going to introduce to the world your culture, you're going to introduce, musicals, everything that you think about that surrounds the industry. So I think that gaming has given Macau a platform from which it can build up, right? And I think it's a good thing when you have that kind of strategy, so that you can use what you save, so that you create new opportunities. It's a little like, you think about gaming industry like having oil when you become in an oil-rich country and using that resource, like Norway does, in order to develop a better country. So I think, education will be part of it, but I think, the gaming industry somehow will provide the basis, and they have to be smart enough to do it.
Yeah, another new element for this area is probably the Greater Bay Area, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Bay Area aims to create this dynamic city cluster with regions or cities complement each other in terms of capital, information, tech. What kind of impact do you think this will bring to Macau?
I think Macau will be integrated into the area and have a better future for development because that has happened globally. If you look at Japan, they have also a greater Bay Area, the United States, a greater Bay Area, and also in European countries, there are other examples showing that when there's a limit, natural limit or other limits to the city to expand, you have to integrate more space and more people into the region and also integrate multiple industry to support a more lively system. And Macau would be have a much better future in that system with the support from surrounding cities and areas, because one city cannot have all the industries, right? Like you said, gaming industry and also in the future conference is a very important industry for Macau too. But Macau cannot take over other functions from Hong Kong or Shenzhen or Guangzhou. They have their own innovative and other industries. So integrating them together, having each of them have their comparative advantage, that would be the best for all the cities in the region.
What kind of role do you think Macau will play in this vision?
I agree completely on that sense that, and that's the whole story of economics, right? You have comparative advantage and you use it to your benefit. So if Macau now has an advantage with the gaming industry that allows it to build a platform for other stuff, conferences and cultural events and all that, I think that by integrating it into a wider region, it can also learn from other places, things that can be used internally, and also have this exchange that will have an economic impact. So, we live in a world where we believe a lot in integration for you to get more cooperation and also have access to things that you did not have before. So I think that by integrating Macau into a greater area allows it to have access to other areas where it needs, and somehow it's able to benefit more.
Yeah, but will this vision be somehow threatened by the turbulence or the unrest we're seeing in Hong Kong?
I don't think so, because this is a long-term plan. And I think Hong Kong has a short-term problem, and in the long run, they both have very bright futures. I would say one thing is that actually the Greater Bay Area plan will reduce many of the tension that now exist in Hong Kong and also in this general region. Because, for instance, high housing price, high education and healthcare price. When you have an integrated area, people in Macau and in Hong Kong can enjoy lower housing price and have better education in this whole region instead of being cramped into a very small space, right? So I think to share more resources in the region and communicate with each other will better serve the interest of people in the whole region.
Right, and the city is also poised to play an important role in linking trade and commerce with Portuguese-speaking countries. How well is the city doing that? What's the potential there?
Oh, I think there's a whole lot more that can be done. And I think one of the issues is that how we get more investments from Macau in other places, in Africa or in Brazil. So I think, if we find ways of creating like this platform for investment and also for, Macau money going into these countries and developing industries there, but also these countries using Macau as a platform to enter China, to enter mainland China. A little like we say that the same role that Portugal, in a way, was trying to play in relation to Brazil entering the European Union. So it's always good to have like this point of entry where we share cultural aspects that somehow can help us, understand the markets better.
Yeah, and Professor, your thoughts on this?
I think exactly there's a natural need for China to go through Macau to other Portuguese-speaking countries, and for those countries coming to China. Macau is a window for exchange. And that's precisely why the Financial Times report is wrong, because they're saying this is, because Macau behaved, therefore the central government is giving them financial policies to somehow, help them develop. No, there's a natural demand on both ways to have Macau to establish a better financial industry to help the money flow and also to help other countries in China to communicate better through Macau.
And if I may add one thing also, the instability that you see in Hong Kong somehow will benefit Macau. Now, I'm just looking into what happened in Canada, right? With the Quebec separation issue, that there was a huge discussion. A lot of money flew from the Quebec to Toronto, and all of a sudden Toronto became like a huge, important region. So you have to realize that whatever you're doing now has a long-term impact, and I think that's an important thing for you to consider when you're looking into Macau.
Right, and that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Professor Zhao Hai from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and also Professor Marcus Vinicius de Freitas, Senior Fellow at the Policy Center for the New South. Appreciate your insights and your perspectives. And that's it for this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point. We hope to see you same time next Friday. Bye for now. Have a good one.